This latest chapter of My Hero Academia begins with a recounting of Endeavor's signature move, Flash Fire Fist. When it's accomplished by way of raising one's internal temperature, while simultaneously gathering as much heat as humanly possible before releasing it in an absurdly powerful burst. A technique which was crafted by Endeavor in his youth, and is at this point considered to be the apex of fire moves. As actually, while developing the move, Endeavor believed he himself had reached his apex, the limit of his incredible potential, what would ultimately lead him down a path of depravity in the pursuit of a superior inheritor of his power, therefore making the completion of the Flash Fire Fist the commencement of the tragic story that would emerge from the Todoroki household. Now bringing us to this climactic battle between Shoto and his eldest brother Toya, the now especially charred villain by the name of DABI. After having provided the story of how he became DABI in the wake of being saved by All for One, and subsequently discovered that despite having survived, he was ultimately just a failure his father had to move on from, DABI would thank Shoto for listening to his tale, as it felt really good to say it out loud. After all, this was information he had never divulged to anyone. Shoto in the meanwhile would begin to coalesce a bit of fire in his hands as he recognized that the rate of his brother's rise in temperature was most definitely abnormal. DABI wouldn't stop and would actually say aloud that perhaps it's not so horrible that his dad didn't show up. After all, the death of Endeavor's closest sidekicks and his prized child Shoto would just make the heat under his father even more intense. All the while, the statued visage of the former symbol of peace, All Might, was rapidly melting on account of its proximity to the villain, which should serve to exemplify just how heated the area around DABI really is. Now, most modern statues are primarily made out of bronze, so for DABI to pull this off, he would need to heat at least beyond 1,675 degrees Fahrenheit or 913 degrees Celsius, and that is insane. As Shoto would then confidently proclaim that he would be the one to stop DABI here and now, as his brother would make something very, very clear, that for years he had been preparing for the day he would be able to murder Shoto. But back when he tried to regain his capabilities, DABI was at the time only able to raise his heat, and what kept him trying his best were the words of his father back when he wasn't seen as a failure, the acknowledgement that Toya was better than him. And in remembering that, despite the difficulty, DABI no longer saw himself as limited in this way, nor was he capable of feeling the physical pain anymore on account of the doctor's experiments. And with that, he would go on to obsess over his father, learning all that he could from the videos of the hero. Which once more brings us back to the present, where DABI was in the midst of charging up his own Flash Fire Fist as he questioned his little brother, asking him if he was a fan of All Might. Everyone would brace for impact as DABI would let loose his version of Endeavor's Hell Spider special move, what was way too intense for a number of heroes to remain near. And still, Ito was on the outskirts of this fight and could not engage because of his engines. He would recognize that this was a far bigger and unhinged version of Endeavor's move, what would make him recall the previous sentiments expressed by Shoto in regards to dealing with his familial issues, prompting him to yell Shoto's name aloud. And maybe I'm not the biggest Ito fan, but I certainly don't want him to just stand here incapable of doing anything. So I am pretty curious how he'll manage to be injected and or used in this fight, as his placement here was most definitely for a reason. Meanwhile, the sidekicks of Endeavor would do their absolute best to curb the flames of DABI and would call upon their de facto leader Shoto, wondering if he was ready to return the favor, which he would reply to by saying that he was, urging them all to begin the counterattack. But before he could even finish his statement, oh so suddenly, DABI would make his way behind his younger brother. He was too fast. Hell Spider was nothing more than a distraction for the sake of this, as he would heat up even further, questioning Shoto in regards to something that was on his mind. He would slam his fiery fist into the boy's face, propelling him a great distance away, as he dementedly asked how Shoto possibly managed to have the patience to remain hidden along with all those powerless civilians while everything else was going on. DABI, of course, time and time again showing us how impatient he can be in regards to punishing his father. As Shoto recoiled from the blow, DABI would call him a worthless combination of fire and ice, reminding him that he was Endeavor's son, that he was his brother. Shoto would desperately attempt to guard himself against the preceding attempt to assail him, as DABI wondered if the kid had no shame at all. Burnin would cry out to Shoto, but it was no use. DABI had exceeded the firepower of Endeavor, yet even still, these temperatures were just too much. This was well beyond human capacity, and this is a reminder that is provided to us several times over, somewhat subtly, over the course of this chapter. So I actually believe it is safe to presume that at some point over the course of this battle, DABI's body is going to give out on him, what may consider to be a direct resultant of QUIRK singularity. Another case who emphasized the importance of that concept. But yeah, it's here that DABI would show us even more of his resentment. Resentment aimed at not only his father Endeavor, but Shoto as well. He'd speak of how the kid had the perfect body, the perfect training situation, and even despite all that, he decided to cling onto others like a weakling. As far as DABI was concerned, Shoto was born with everything, just as what was narratively described to be the case with him by Dr. Garaki previously. Yet despite this, he saw Shoto as too cowardly to seize his destiny, and so he would decide to be real with Shoto since nobody else seemed capable of doing so. He'd speak of how Shoto couldn't properly fulfill the role of a puppet as he slammed his foot onto the ground with Shoto shooting up, and made use of Endeavor's jet burn attack as he said Shoto would never become a hero, as even the ground beneath them was melting. And he managed to send Shoto all the way into a nearby skyscraper. My friends, the firepower being displayed in this conflict is just absolutely absurd. Remember that DABI was actually enthusiastic about his father's training and desired it more than anything. Yet the very training and purpose that he so desired and was denied was not only provided to, but refused by his younger brother. His younger brother who possessed exactly the bodily disposition that he lacked. And so yeah, he really could not stand Shoto either. Now again, DABI attacking at this level was absolutely detrimental to his form whether he felt it or not, as he'd actually noticed some difficulty with his arm after that last move. Yet from the skyscraper, Shoto begins to speak. He'd admit that he was a loser, that for oh so very long, he was directionless and saw himself as nothing more than an idiot. And while he said this, DABI began to wonder to himself if Shoto actually managed to negate his heat just then. Shoto previously believed DABI only cared about their father, however, now knowing that DABI was actually watching him all this time, oddly enough, made him pretty happy. He'd recount all the many strides in the development and cultivation of his power. He felt that in the past he was always chasing after others, but it was because of those times that he was able to figure out his very own technique. A move he had created all on his own, made specifically to defeat his villainous brother. We would then flash back to Shoto being on the phone with his father in regards to his mission in this operation, the plans of which we had previously seen Endeavor distressed by in regards to what we now know to be this particular matchup. Over the phone, he would tell Shoto that he didn't need to go through with this fight, but Shoto would then question what will become of All for One then. As among the small pool of heroes they currently had at their disposal, Endeavor was the only one who could stand a chance against All for One, just like how Deku was the only one who could stand up against Shigaraki. And just like those two cases, he believed himself to be the one best suited to take down Toya. And even beyond that, he wanted to be the one to do it. Endeavor would pause only to then respond that such a thing was his duty, not Shoto's, but Shoto insisted that they do it together, that they would do all that they could, not only to defeat Toya, but every one of the villains. As in the present, Shoto would let DABI know that there was something he needed to get off of his chest as well. He would admit that his brother was correct when it came to the fact that their home life was a living hell, and their father was absolutely insane. However, it was DABI that decided to become a murderer and no one else. As now, Shoto made full use of his body's flames, charging up his own flash fire fist as he yelled at his brother to never again steal the lives of people who had nothing to do with his downfall. DABI was annoyed by this self-righteous exclamation, but before he could respond, Shoto delivered onto him the evolution of the move that started it all. What was in essence the fulfillment of his destiny, as he wanted to surpass their father, as he told DABI to instead take it all out on them. This was Shoto's very own special move, Flash Fire Fist Phosphorus. The very element you may most be familiar with on account of its presence on the side of matchboxes. The intensity of this fight compared to the rest is to me reminiscent of the glorious battle between Prince Zuko and the then Fire Lord Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, a series I used to cover a lot back in the day. The comparisons of which even beyond this fight are numerous, but yeah, oddly enough, this is the fight I feel the most locked into and fascinated by. And quite honestly, I find myself becoming more and more of a Shoto fan as the series goes on, and clearly, it is for good reason. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.